Okay, so we are going to now graph quadratic functions where it's the full quadratic function, so the ax squared plus bx plus c. And so let's write that form down. Y equals ax squared plus bx plus c. So that is our standard form for a quadratic function. We're going to need to know these because we're going to be referencing these coefficients, a, b, and c, within graphing. So the very first thing when we go to graph these functions, it says to find the vertex. Remember, the vertex is that minimum or maximum point where the graph kind of peaks, either at the top or at the bottom there. So we're going to find that first. And the way that you find that is you have your x equal to negative b divided by 2a. So I'm going to write that. I don't like the way they wrote it there. So negative b over 2 times a. So we're going to use that in order to find our vertex x value. Now you notice it says x equals. That's going to tell you what the x value of that vertex is. What you'll then have to do is plug that in to find where that y is in order to find that exact point. The next thing that it says make a t-chart. So when you make that t-chart, that's that like function table that we did, but you don't have to write the full function table if you don't want to. You can if you need it. I will probably do that for the purpose of this video. Where you would have your y equals, and then whatever the equation is would go in here, and you do that work, and then you get your y, so on. So we're gonna do that. So it says to find the vertex by using the x is equal to negative b over 2a. Then you make a t-chart or a function table, however you're most comfortable. A t-chart is just where you have just your x and y. And you go and you do the work to find out what your y is somewhere else. Then it says use 2 x values to the right of the x that you found here, to the right of this x, and then 2 values to the left of it. And we'll talk about which values you should choose in order to kind of check your own work when I start to do some examples. And then it says then you will calculate the y values for those x values that you chose. And then you will graph all of the points in your t-chart and connect with the curved lines, the parabola, then to make that parabola. So let's just start. So the first one here, you've got y is equal to negative x squared plus 2x plus 3. So I'm going to go up here and I'm going to make my function table. And I've got y is equal to negative x squared plus 2x plus 3. Okay, so the first thing that it says to do is to find my vertex by using this x is equal to negative b over 2a. What does that mean? What that means is you've got to identify your b and your a. So your b is that coefficient out in front of that second term. That is your b. And then your a is the coefficient out in front of your first term. Well, that's a negative, but there's no number with it, so it means it's a negative 1. So my a is negative 1 and my b is 2. So I'm going to plug those in to this equation. So x is equal to negative b, so negative 2, over 2 times your a. Your a is a negative 1. And I just used the parentheses because a number next to parentheses means multiply. So I now have negative 2 over 2 times negative 1, negative 2. So that means that that is going to be negative 2 divided by negative 2, positive 1. So my x is equal to a positive 1. Now, that's my vertex point. So I'm going to put that here. So I've got my vertex point here for the x. That's the x value. I have to figure out what that y value is. So I'm going to have to plug in that x value into the equation wherever there's an x. So I've got negative and then in parentheses 1 squared plus 2 in parentheses 1 plus 3. And then I would work that out to figure out my y. So let's work that out. So I've got 1 squared is just 1, but that's a negative 1 out there. So this is going to be negative 1 right here. And then plus 2 times 1, so plus 2, and then plus 3. So I have negative 1 plus 2 is a 1. And then 1 plus 3 is 4. So my y is going to be 4. So my vertex, I always do my vertex as the first one here. Because you find your vertex first so that you know which point you're going to choose for your x. So I found my vertex. It's at 1, 4. So I'm going to label that on here. It's going to go to my graph. And I'm going to find 1 on my x, 4 on my y. So it's going to be right here. You don't have to label the vertex with the word vertex. I'm just doing that for the purpose of the notes. You wouldn't normally. So I've got that here. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to have to decide 2 x values to the right and 2 x values to the left of this point. So if I look down here on my x-axis, I'm going to choose 2 points that way and 2 this way. So an x2 and an x3 looks good to me. Because then I'm going to go the same on this side. So I went 1 away here for 2, 2 away here for 3. I'm going to go 1 away here at 0, and then 2 away here at negative 1. The reason I do that is so that it's going to end up being symmetric, because remember I talked about how you've got the line of symmetry, or the axis of symmetry here through the vertex, and it looks like it's been like folded or mirrored over that. So whatever point I get for this, I should get the same y value for that. Whatever y value I get for this 3, I should get the same for this negative 1. So I'm going to put those in here. It'll make a little bit more sense while I'm going through it here. I lost internet. Awesome. So I'm going to choose the points, I said 2 and 3, and then also 0 and negative 1. Those are my x values that I'm choosing, and I'm going to plug those in. Now I'm going to kind of go a little quick through this. Ask questions if you're not understanding how I'm getting the answer. So y is equal to a negative, and then 2 inside plus. So I'm just plugging in that 2 wherever there was an x, and then I'm going to work that out. It's 4, that's 4, so a negative 4 plus 4, that's 0, plus 3, so this should be 3. And then I've got y is equal to a negative, and then this is 3 squared plus 2 times 3, and then plus 3. So I have 3 squared is 9, 2 times 3 is 6, and then I've got negative 9 plus 6, so that's going to be a negative 3 right there. Negative 3 plus 3 is 0. Now here at 0, if I plug 0 in for x, I love 0, because 0 kind of just cancels out these 2 terms, and you're left with just your c. It's really great. So y is equal to, and I'll show you how, plug in your 0 wherever there's an x. So 0 squared is 0, that whole thing's 0 right there. And then 2 times 0 is 0, 0 plus 0 is 0, and then plus 3. See how it all kind of canceled out, and it was just that constant that's left? That's what you're going to get when you plug 0 in for x. It's great. And then negative 1. So I've already got a negative out here, and I'm going to do parentheses, negative 1 inside the parentheses, squared, 2, negative 1, plus 3. Okay, so I've got negative 1 squared is just a 1, but I've got this negative out here in front of it. Then 2 times negative 1 is negative 2. So I have negative 1 minus 2. That makes that whole thing negative 3. And then plus 3. Negative 3 plus 3 is 0. Did you notice that these two things, see how the 3's repeated and the 0's repeated? That's because it's going to end up being symmetric over it. So you're going to see what happens here. So I've got the point 2, 3. So 2, 3 is right here. And then 3, 0. 3, 0 is here. Now, this 0 for my x, 3 for my y. So that means I'm on my y-axis at 3. Look how that's mirroring over this line. And so then if I had to like guess, I would say right here is where my other one is, because it's mirroring over it, and it is. It's at -1, 0. And now you just make your parabola. So you just kind of curve it out here. Now I've graphed it. I used this table in order to help me graph it. The next one I'm going to show you with a T-chart, just so you can see me doing both ways. So depending on which one you prefer. So the next one I'm going to do a T-chart. So number 2. Again, the very first thing is to find your vertex. So I've got my vertex is at x equals -b over 2a. My b is right there in front of my x. It's the coefficient of x. And then my a is the coefficient right in front of the x squared. Well, there's no number there, but it is. It's the number 1. So my a is 1 and my b is 6. Okay, so I've got -b, so -6, over 2 times your a, which my a is 1. So I've got -6 over 2, which is -3. So my x value for my vertex is at -3. I'm going to do a T-chart. Again, just to show you how you would do that. So my x value for my vertex is at -3. Again, you start with your vertex. It's always going to be that first one. It's -3. And then we've got to figure out what my y is. So I have to, at somewhere here, kind of organized, I'm going to have to show the work, because I've got to do work, right? So I'm going to make some room here. So I'm going to do y is equal to, and this is when x is equal to -3. So when x is equal to -3, I've got y equals -3 squared plus 6 times -3, and then plus 6. So then this becomes 9, because -3 times -3 is 9. And then 6 times a -3, that's going to be a -18. So I've got 9 minus 18, that's going to be -9 plus 6, that gives me -3. So my y value is going to be -3. -3, -3. Now I'm going to put this on the graph here. So I'm at -3 on my x, -3 on my y here. So right here it is. That's my vertex. Now I have to decide 2 x values that way and 2 x values this way. Again, I try to make it the same distance away so that it ends up being symmetric. So if I don't get repeating numbers, it kind of draws my attention. So I'm going to do -2 and -1 and -4, -5. All these negatives. Jeez. All right, so -2 and -1, and then -4 and -5. And again, I'm going to have to show my work somewhere. I'm going to work it out. So x is equal to -2. I'm going to do y equals -2 squared plus 6 times -2 plus 6. So work this out. You've got -2 squared, that's 4, plus, and then you've got 6 times -2, so that's -12. So I've got 4 minus 12, that's a -8, plus 6, that's going to be -2. So -2, -2. Well, that's kind of creepy. Then I'm going to do x is equal to -1. Y equals -1 squared plus 6 times negative 1 plus 6. So 1 squared is just 1. 6 times negative 1 is negative 6. 1 minus 6, negative 5. And then plus 6 would give you, it'd just give you 1. So I've got 1 here. Now, if I had to guess, I would say that this is going to be negative 2 and that's going to be 1. But we'll see what happens. All right, again, showing my work. When x is equal to negative 4, I've got y equals negative 4. I don't even know if you can even see my work on here. Sorry if you can't. I'll have to do the work up there. So on this one, you've got negative 4 squared is 16. And then 6 times negative 4 is negative 24. So 16 minus 24 is going to give you negative 8. Negative 8 plus 6 is negative 2. So I got negative 2 here. It did end up repeating. I'm going to work my last one up here just so you guys can see it on there. So x equals, my last one's negative 5. Y is equal to negative 5 squared plus 6 times negative 5 plus 6. 5 squared, 25. 6 times negative 5 is negative 30. 25 minus 30 is negative 5, and then plus 6 is 1. Look at that. I think we did everything right because my numbers repeated. Now I'm going to plot all these points. I've got my points all right here. So I'm going to plot the point negative 2, negative 2. So negative 2 is right here. And then negative 1, 1. And negative 4 and negative 2 right here. And then negative 5 and 1. And then I'm going to make my parabola. Curve it out, curve it out. They're not straight lines, curve it out. And again, I want you to notice that it is reflective or mirroring over this axis of symmetry. That's what symmetry means. It means that it's the same on both sides. So it's kind of mirrored. And then I do want to point out one more thing. So before we move on to the very last one that I'm going to do with you, I'm going to point out the fact that if your A is positive, so you're going to want to write this down. This is going to be really handy because you can kind of predict what your graph's going to look like. So if your A is positive, so let's put this down here. If A is positive, then it opens up. Meaning, it's happy. It's a smiley face. Yay! Positive, happy. Do you like that? Then, if A is negative, oh, that's not showing up very well. That's kind of negative. If A is negative, then guess what happens? Yeah, it opens down like a frowny, like negative people that frown. It opens down. So if your A is positive, it opens up. If your A is negative, it opens down. Now let's check. So on this first one, our A was a negative 1, and it opened down. On the second one, our A was a positive 1, and it opened up. Now we're going to do the last one together, and we're going to skip quite a bit. We're going to go to number 7, because number 7 has a fraction in it, and I'm sure that's going to freak some of you out. So we're going to skip ahead to number 7, skipping all the way to number 7. I'm going to zoom in a little here. So on number 7, I'm going to do a little predicting before we start while I'm erasing here. So number 7, your A, again, your A is with your x squared. So your A is -1/2. It's negative. Your A is negative, which means it's going to open down. It's going to be like a frowny. So it's going to open down. Then we'll just need to find the vertex, and we'll have kind of a general idea of what it's going to look like once we graph it. So the first thing is to find the vertex. So I've got to find the vertex. So x is equal to -b over 2a. My 2 is the b because it's with the x. And then my a, right, it's that number that's out in front of the x squared. So my a is -1/2. Oh, how do I put a fraction inside of a fraction? It'll be okay, I promise. So first of all, we're going to do -b. So -2 over. Now, I'm going to, first of all, it's got 2 times, and then your a, so -1/2. Just put it in there for a second, because it's actually going to go away. So I've got 2 times a -1/2. Positive times a negative is going to give you a negative. So I've got -2 up here, and I'm going to have a negative down here. And then what is 1/2 of 2? 1/2 of 2 is just 1. It's just a 1. Now, if you need that worked out, 2 times 1/2. Remember to multiply a fraction with a whole number, drop a 1, multiply straight across, 2 over 2, which is 1. See how that worked out? So it is going to be a -1 down there. So now I have a -2 divided by a -1, which is going to be a +2. So that's my x value of my vertex. Y equals -1/2 x squared plus 2x minus 5. Okay, so I'm going to make the table this time. And I've got my vertex point is always going to be my first one. Always. So my x value for my vertex is 2, and I will then figure out what my y is. And we need to do that before we decide which x values we're going to choose. I mean, I guess we don't have to because we know where the x2 is, right? We could choose 2 that way and 2 that way. But I usually just find the vertex and then go from there. So I've got y is equal to -1/2, and then my x squared plus 2, and then my x, and then -5. I'm just going to do that really quick just to save time because this takes a while. So I'm just writing this in without the x, but with a parenthesis where the x is going to go. So I've got one more I need. I'm invading into the y spot here. Okay. Now I'm going to plug in my x value, so it's 2 here, and then I'm going to start solving that. So I've got 2 squared, you do the exponent first. 2 squared is 4. A negative times a positive is going to give you a negative, and then 1/2 of 4 is 2. So it's going to be a -2 right there. 2 times 2 is 4. That's +4. So I've got -2 plus 4. -2 plus 4 is 2. 2 minus 5 is -3. So I'm going to plot this point on here. I've got 2, -3. So 2 and then -3. And then I'm going to think to myself, how is it going to open? My A was negative, so it's going to open down. and it's gonna fit on this graph? Oh, I hope we did everything right. So let's just see. I'm gonna choose 2 x's that way, so 3 and 4. And then 2 this way, which 1 and 0. Oh, I love 0. Yay. 0's the easy one. Can I do that one first? I'm gonna do that one first. 0. So I've got that term all cancels out. That one all cancels out. I'm left with just -5. That one was fun. All right, now I'm going to start filling these in. So 4 1s. Oh, these get ugly. It's okay. 3 squared is 9. 1/2 of 9 you can just write as 9/2. So this is negative, again, if you don't understand why, so -1/2 times 9, drop a 1 under, go straight across. 9/2, but it's a negative, because negative times a positive. So -9/2. So this becomes, right here, all of that becomes a -9/2. 2 times 3 is 6. And then -5. I'm going to go ahead and combine the 6 minus 5 real fast, because 6 minus 5 is 1. I'm going to have to work this all out down here. So I've got -9/2 plus 6 minus 5. Sorry, I had to bring it down here to show you. So I've got 6 minus 5 is actually a 1. -9/2 plus 1. How would I do that? You can change it to decimal if you're more comfortable with that. What's half of 9? It's going to be 4.5. So -4.5 plus 1, that's going to give you -3.5. Or -7/2 is what you would end up. So I'm going to do -3.5. So then this number 4, I'm going to work through that one. 4 squared is 16. Negative times a positive, that's going to give me a negative. And then what's half of 16? 8. So -8 is what I get for this whole term here. 2 plus 4 is 8, or 2 times 4 is 8. Jeez. -8 plus 8 is 0. So then I just have -5. Oh, look, that's matching that. So this one, I should end up the same here, -3.5. Let's just see if we do. 1 squared is 1. So I've got -1/2 times 1 is just -1/2. So I've got -1/2. And then plus 2. 2 times 1 is 2. Minus 5. 2 minus 5 is -3. So I've got -1/2 minus 3, that's -3.5 or -3.5. You could turn that 1/2 to 0.5. So this is going to be a -3.5. That one was ugly. So let's graph this one. I've got at the point 3 and -3.5. So -3.5 is going to be here. And then 4 and -5. So here's 4 and here's my -5. And then I've got 1 and -3.5. So 1 and -3.5, that's right here. And then 0 and -5 is here. And I got your parabola. There you go. There is your graph. Again, we predicted that it would open down because my A was negative. This was one of the uglier ones just because we had a fraction in it, so it was a little bit more difficult to go through. And I know it's kind of hard to read my work, my fun little scribbles that I've got here, when I'm doing the function table. So a lot of people do prefer to do the X, Y, T chart because they just go off to the side and do the work for the stuff so they have more room. It is completely up to you how you do it. If you can get through your work and understand it like I can get through that and understand my work, then you are fine with doing it this way. It's just up to you how you want to organize it, just as long as we can see your work. so we could see where you made a mistake if you end up making a mistake. Make sure that it does end up being symmetric over the axis of symmetry here. So it does end up being symmetric, and that's how you kind of check your work. You can also, when you're done, throw this equation into Desmos, and that should check your work too. Remember that? All right. You're on your own to finish the rest of it.